Good morning, Rodney.
Good morning.
42-3. Alabama wins the first game over Duke from the ACC. Just your impressions, having watched the game live on television, and I know you've probably gone back and watched the replay as well. What did you see from the Crimson Tide in the season opener?
Well, first of all, after that slow start, I really, really liked the diversity that Sarkisian brought to the offense. I thought we saw a lot of different things offensively. There was a lot of balance in terms of the play calling. At one point, it was 50-50 late in the game. I don't know exactly what it ended up, carry the exact numbers, but there was balance there in terms of the play calling. I thought that they obviously did a lot of RPOs last year. It was good to see some different things in this game that I think certainly will be helpful down the stretch against better defenses when you have the ability to exploit those defenses with the things that I thought Sarkisian has added. A lot of nice little crossing routes to just get the ball in the hands of those playmakers that are so quick, so elusive, whether it's Jerry Jeudy, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, Ruggs. Even saw some throws to the tight end, obviously a couple of touchdown passes. So I really like that part of it. Now, one thing I will say is I think Alabama fans are so used to seeing a team every year, a Nick Saban team, that you plug in a player here, you plug in a player there, and you pretty much know what you're getting. See, I think this team's a little bit different as I look at them. The offensive line, for example, you have two returning starters on the outside, but the interior is still kind of a work in progress. I think they have a chance to be really good in time. But, it's something that I think we saw Saturday. You're talking about a true freshman at left guard, and they worked a lot of different combinations, as we thought they
did.
But you had a true freshman at left guard. You had a center who had never started a game before, and you had a guy at right guard who's been in Tuscaloosa for about 6 weeks. So I think we need to keep those things in mind. I think on the defensive side, you've got a lot of young players. You started 3 true freshmen, one at nose tackle, and then the 2 inside backers. I thought all of them performed really, really well, especially for the first game. So all of that, I just think that this team has a lot of potential. It's more of this team about development to me of some of these younger players. And if they can get all these guys developed, and the potential is certainly there, then I think this team can be really, really good. But I do think that it's going to require a little bit of patience because it's not going to be quite what I think we've seen in the past in some ways.
I think that's a very interesting analysis. You alluded to the sluggish start, and it was. I was there, and I can tell you, Rodney, the energy was just not there to start the game. And to give Duke credit, they were fired up, and they came out and made some plays on defense in that first series. Do you think, and this is just the question I'm asking, it's for your opinion because there's no way to know for sure, but do you think maybe knowing that 4 players were going to be suspended for that first quarter, 4 key players, still a little bit of a disappointment or a lot of disappointment over the injury to their teammate Dylan Moses, the leader on their defense? I almost got the feeling it's like, let's just get through this first quarter, then let's get our guys back, then let's go play. Do you think that was a possibility?
Well, I think it certainly wasn't helpful that you're missing those guys. So I think it kind of goes back to what I was saying. You had so many players who had never played before. You had Jerome Ford at running back. He got the ball punched out early. I think you had some issues on the offensive line in protection. Again, going back to really the only guy, Gary, when you think about it, at the same position up front offensively is Jedrick Wills. Because Leatherwood was a right guard last year. Now, again, I realize as a true freshman he stepped in and played left tackle in that national championship game and did a fantastic job. But just the cohesiveness of the offensive line. So I think there was a lot of kind of, I just felt like they needed to get, I don't know if comfortable's the word, a rhythm, whatever it is. I'm not really sure. But it almost, honestly, it seemed like a carryover from what we saw on January the 8th or whatever it was. Initially it was like a hangover. But, once they got in rhythm and got going, they started, really kind of clicking, and I thought they started to find themselves.
As you said, 3 true freshman starters up the middle of that defense. DJ Dale, nose tackle, and Shane Lee and Christian Harris at inside linebacker. Those two, the Mike and the Will. They gave up 204 yards and 3 points. And I watched those linebackers. Again, they're going to grow. They're going to learn. But I was thrilled with how they played. In fact, I mean, it wouldn't matter who was out there. I mean, in this day and age, against the Power 5 team, when you give up 3 points and 204 total yards and you force a couple of interceptions, that's a good day's work, Rodney, if you'd had 2 senior inside linebackers. I thought those guys, and Dale as well, played really, really well.
Well, a couple of things to me that are just thoughts of mine would be these kids coming out of high school nowadays, Gary, they've played against a lot of these different offenses.
That's right.
It's so they're really, I guess you could say, they're more ready to play sometimes. I think just with the knowledge that they gather in offense of the offenses in high school that they play against. And another thing, Christian Harris was a multiple dimensional player in high school. What I mean by that, he returned kicks, he played wide receiver, he played cornerback, he played safety. So he's extraordinarily athletic. And I thought he was really, really good in coverage for the most part that I saw. He blanketed his guy, as did Shane Lee. Shane Lee was really good. I mean, he stuffed a couple of runs right up the middle in short yardage situations, knew where to be, filled the hole very quickly, was good in coverage, read those things very well. And again, I do think, like you said, they may come into situations where, they're going to be really challenged, but I thought they did extremely well for the first game. And I think, too, you have to credit Pete Golding because those guys seem ready to play.
I'm with you. I was very, very pleased with the defense. Offensively, nothing to say negatively about Tua, 26 of 31, 336 for touchdowns, Heisman numbers. Judy, 10 catches, 137 yards, and a TD. The 2 tight ends, what were the odds of that Forrestall and Tennyson would catch the first 2 touchdown passes of the year from Tua? Jalen Waddle had a nice game. I thought the offensive line, for the most part, pass blocked well, Rodney. They did give up the 1 sack early, but I thought they were fine in pass protection. The running game, though, 42 carries for 145 yards leaves some to be desired. And that's an area where we were hoping we would see improvement from Alabama. Once again, we saw Najee kind of wanting to bump everything outside. We saw late in the second half, a second one and third one where they couldn't pick up a first. They punted to Duke, and that was Duke's really only true drive of the game. I think they went 60-plus yards for a field goal. So that's an area that's still a work in progress with that offensive line, but Alabama's going to have to run the football better against the better defenses, don't you believe? It's got to be picked up some.
Yeah, I think going to your pass protection comment, too, I thought when they started getting the ball out real quickly, that certainly kind of helped things a little bit. Sarkisian going to a lot of those little crossing routes, those quick outs that they were throwing, that was very, very helpful. And then the run after the catch was certainly huge, those with those receivers. But as far as the running game goes, I think it all obviously starts up front. And once they develop that cohesiveness there and find the 5 that they definitely want to stick with, I think that'll certainly be very beneficial. Now, I will say this, too. As I look at and I said this back when we talked right after A-Day, and that is the one thing I see in that running back core that is needed. They need somebody that can bring some pop. And when I say that, I mean somebody that has an initial burst. And that's just my opinion. I mean, I watched Oregon the other night against Auburn, and they hurt Auburn with those quick backs. Now, they didn't have a sledgehammer later in the game that could really pound it, so that hurt them. But I do think that, when you look at what Alabama right now, I think if they start getting some movement up front offensively, then I think Brian Robinson and Najee can really run it downhill. But I think they also need to find some pop, whether that's Jerome Ford or Keelan Robinson or both of those guys. I just think you need to see that in the running game.
The freshman kicker, Will Riker, handled both place kicking and punting duties. He punted twice for a 40-yard average. His extra points were terrific. His kickoffs were great. He did miss his 2 field goal attempts, although he hit both of them very, very well. He hit a 49 or 50-yard attempt off the right upright. Then later he missed one where he overcorrected and pulled it and hit the left upright. What was your impression of Will Riker?
Honestly, I felt kind of sorry for him, and I tell you why, Gary. I mean, you know, when you have a true freshman kicker like that, I think you'd really like to have him kicking about a 35-yarder, you know, on that first kick, just to kind of get the bugs out. You know, I mean, it's not really a great thing to step out there, I guess, on your first field goal. It's a 48 and 49-yarder, and you hit them extremely well. I mean, he just banked them right off the uprights. So, I mean, you know, I'm confident that he's got the leg, and I think he's going to be really, really good. Hopefully he gets some confidence maybe starting this week with, you know, his the direction of his kicks.
This game coming up Saturday, I mean, New Mexico State, you have to be honest, they're one of the worst teams in the country. They might be in the conversation as the worst team in the country. Having said that, you got a lot of young players. You're trying to build continuity. You got to go to South Carolina the next week. If this game goes expected, the second half, do you stay with your starters maybe a little bit longer, trying to just build rhythm, or do we see what Alabama usually does, which is just clear the bench and get the young guys in there? And how do you think this game will play out?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think if it did get out of hand, I think to me, and again, I don't know what they think, but I would say that you really want to get some of these other guys some experience. This would be a great opportunity to certainly get more guys some playing reps and some opportunity to develop, so you have that depth maybe down the road. So yeah, I would expect, Gary, if that game were to get out of hand, as a lot of people think it will, then I mean, I do expect a lot of players to play. And guess what? There was a lot of players that looked like it. I didn't count the number, you may know, but I thought there was a lot of players that played in this game the other day. And I'm not just talking about down the stretch. I mean, they alternated a lot of guys in the offensive line. So it's going to be interesting to see, who all gets an opportunity this Saturday. It
really will. I thought some of those backup offensive linemen played well in that game. All right, Rodney, before we close it out, certainly during fall camp, the focus is on getting ready to play. And recruiting, drops off a little bit in terms of the coach's contact with the prospects. But now we're into the season, official visits. This will be the first home game. I want to ask you if there are any tidbits. I guess the next domino we're waiting to fall potentially would be Joel Williams, the defensive back out of Baton Rouge. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he's going to commit on the 9th. September the 9th, if I'm not mistaken.
Are you expecting Alabama with him?
I know Alabama's been in good position with him, certainly. Very versatile player. I think they really liked what they saw of him in camp, and I feel pretty good about him. Now, again, Gary, sometimes, and I'm not saying this with Joel Williams, but they're getting real tight on numbers, and I think we've talked about there could be some changes in the current list of players that's committed to open up spots, and that's probably going to happen. They're not going to pass on a player they really want. We know that. But, Joel Williams is a guy in the secondary, and another one would be the JUCO player that's got 3 years of eligibility that we've talked about before, Nadab Joseph. I think those are two guys I would really keep my eye on as far as, potential guys that could commit in the secondary.
All right, it is off and running, and Rodney and I talk about this all the time. You wait for the season, and then it gets here, and it goes by the blink of the eye. So let's enjoy this thing as Alabama tries to build toward national championship number 18. Of course, they can follow the Crimson Tide, all the latest recruiting updates and more at TiderInsider.com.
Right, and Gary, the video, we've got a lot of the WVUA video on the front. We'll have more today, of course, where people, if they don't want to join or just want to check it out, then they can watch all those videos for free, Tider Insider TV, and then the premium stuff as well as the forum, which, it has been rocking and rolling.
Yeah, I can imagine. It was last night. It got pretty crazy. And of course, as Rodney just said, Tighter Insider TV tomorrow night at 6:30 on WVUA 23. Thanks a lot, Rodney.
Okay, buddy. Take care.